Well, hi guys, it's that time. It's our Bible teaching snippet of the day. Well, today I'm going to set in and just talk a little bit about the name Yeshua, and we call him Jesus, okay? I've been in doing a couple of three little teachings about the fact that Lucifer is a made-up name that was inserted into our Bibles, and in that teaching, I brought up the fact that Jesus, the way we know it, Jesus, okay? And I wear t-shirts with Jesus on them all the time, guys, okay? And I've got stickers on my car, so there's no condemnation coming from this Bible teacher. But we know him as Jesus in our common English, but his actual Hebrew translation from the Hebrew directly to English would actually be Yeshua. And I would just want to talk to you a little bit about that, okay? Now, let me start with this. I've got my notes because I'm going to try to stay on point today, which I'm really good at just taking rabbit trails, I know, because everything that I teach has another layer under it, and it's just pulling back layers. Let me start by saying the reason that I really like to read and study Bibles from Jewish writers. Like I have the Jewish Bible, and I have the Kenneth Wuest New Testament and everything. So I really like to peel back layers, and I listen. I've taken some Jewish, we call it Jewish, which, by the way, Julie and I have been going back and forth, and I already know that's not really what they call themselves. It's really Judeans. And then the Samaritans were Jews. Okay, so it was the Samaritan Jews versus the Judean Jews. So it's the same bloodline people, really, from Abraham, but it's two different sets of people. Anyway, let me get back on point. I've studied, not as deep as many people have, but I do have this need and want to understand what's really being taught to us in our New Testament. Now, let me start by saying this, okay? At the time that Hebrew scriptures or manuscripts or scrolls, we can go back even further to scrolls, okay? Those were translated from the Hebrew to Greek, okay? And the English language did not exist, okay? So it went from Hebrew to Greek to English. And every time you move something from its original language to a different language and you don't go back to the original, now you've got things lost in translation because you went from Hebrew to Greek and then Greek to English. How we know that some of the things that's written in our New Testament or even the Old Testament is maybe a little less than perfectly translated from Hebrew to English is because now we can take the Hebrew and translate it from Hebrew directly over to English, and that helps the translations get a little more accurate. Let me read something to you that really kind of confused me and set me off to study the different ways that we say the name Jesus, okay? I'm over in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 8, and this is out of my expanded Bible. For if Joshua, and in parentheses it says Moses' successor who led God's people into the promised land. So if Joshua had led the people into that rest, God would not have spoken later about another day. Did you know that now a lot of the newer updated Bibles actually do say Joshua, just like it does here, okay? But if you read it in the original Bibles, the older ones like the King James and different ones, it doesn't say Joshua. And this is so confusing for someone, right? Let me read it out of the King James the best that I can. And it says, for if Jesus had given them rest, then there would not afterward, then would he not afterward have spoken of another day. I want to read it one more time because it's that reversed English that they use in the Shakespearean, all that old English stuff. Let me read it one more time so I can hit it a little better. For if Jesus had given them rest, then would he not afterward have spoken of another day. Okay, so when I read that, I'm like, what does that mean? Jesus did give us rest. Jesus is the rest. He is our rest. And so none of that made sense. And what it is it's covering the children of Israel and some history. And what it's actually saying there is that if Joshua bringing the people into the promised land, if the promised land was their actual true rest that God was trying to give people, he would not have prophesied and spoken of another day that they would have rest, which would be in Jesus, okay? So that right there is what kind of spurred me into this wondering about. So let me give you some facts and some things that you can think of. The name Jesus has only been used for around 400 years, okay? If you go in and look at the 1611 King James Version of the Bible, Jesus is still spelled I-E-S-U-S, and the I-E is the best that the Greek could come to make that Yah sound. Yeshua, okay, the Yah, okay. And in the original Hebrew writings, Yah is referring to God. It's a Y-A-H, Yah, okay. And Jesus is Yeshua. And so the best they could do from Hebrew to Greek is I, because the J didn't exist in that, okay? The J hasn't been around very long. But then shortly after the 1611, I think it's 1632 or something, I'll post an article with this teaching, and any of you that want to read it can. It's a very in-depth article. And I didn't see any errors in what he wrote, so I'm comfortable with posting that. But in the older Bibles, it's I-E-S-U-S. And less than 400 years ago, it was changed to J-E-S-U-S, from Yeshua to Jesus, okay? And the S was added to the end as well, okay? Yeshua, and we call him Jesus, okay? So it's a little bit off, okay? Now, in the 17th century, which is in the 1600s, the Yah was changed to a J. Now, I want to tell you this. If we translated directly from Hebrew to English, Jesus' name would be Joshua. It would not be Jesus, it would be Joshua, okay? And Joshua and Jesus are the same name, spellings, in Hebrew and in Greek. We just, in English, write it a different way and speak it a different name, okay? I want to throw this in for you. Did you know over here in the Passion Translation, I love their footnotes, but and I've already studied this out, and I have it written above the books of my Bible, where it says James, I've got a little line marked through it, and I've got Jacob written beside it, because the name James is our English name, but the actual Hebrew for that is Jacob. And then in the book of Jude, it's not Jude, it's Judas, okay? The Greek is Judas, but the Hebrew is Jude. And so the Hebrew and Aramaic names for Jesus' half-brothers are not James and Jude. It's actually Jacob and Judas, because those were very commonly used names in that time. I want to give you some more information here. There are two different King James versions, if you want to call it, two King James Bibles. There is the King James Bible, okay, and then we have the King James Version of the Bible. And the reason I want you to understand this, because if you get on the internet and you just put in King James Bible, it will come up, and they still have not changed that to a J-E. The name Jesus is still spelt in that particular Bible in its original of what it was way, way back in the original translations, which is the I-E-S-U-S. Okay? So I hope this is just kind of giving you some information and helps you understand a little bit more. But let me just say this. Again, when you change a language, well, don't mean change, okay? When you go from the Hebrew to the Greek and then the Greek to the English, it's called being lost in translation, okay? So some of the things Not necessarily intentionally. Some things might have been intentional, but I don't know that to be a fact, okay? But when we move from Hebrew to Greek and then to English, see, you're losing things along the way. But when you go back to the Hebrew and you translate it straight from the Hebrew right over to the English, now you get a more cleaner understanding of what was originally written. I hope you understand, and that makes a little bit of sense. Before I close, I started my snippet yesterday, my teaching, and I said this, and I have to say this one more time because, there's so many people out there teaching that if you use the name Jesus, God isn't even listening to you, you're probably not even saved, and all of that crazy stuff, right? I do not want anyone to get under condemnation or guilt because they call Jesus by that name, Jesus, okay? I wear t-shirts that say Jesus on it. Hard to find t-shirts that say Yeshua, and so this is the thing you have to understand, okay? He answers our prayers according to the name that we know him of in our faith in him. Not his name. It's the faith that we have in him as the Son of God. And if you get his name a little bit wrong because somebody taught you wrong or mistranslated a Bible, he's not sitting there going, oh, well, we're not talking to her today, and mark you out. Absolutely not. Please don't let people get you under condemnation of that, okay? I pray in the name of Yeshua when I'm alone because I don't want to confuse people. But if I'm in public, look, I have laid hands on over 2,000 people for healing, and I always pray in the name of Jesus because that's the name that they know, that's the name they have faith in, and he has and will continue to answer our prayers in that name. We don't have to get all upset about any of this, guys, okay? I've seen 5 or 6 maybe people raised from the dead, okay? And I will even say, and I always pray in the name of your Son, Jesus, when I'm in public, because that's what people understand. And it is never, ever my intention to misrepresent him, but I don't ever want to make people lose faith in him because of a translation in a Bible. God doesn't work like that, and neither should us in leadership. We should just walk that walk out and be an example of his amazing love toward his creation and all people, okay? Well, listen, I'm going to hop off. I love you, and I will see you here on Monday, okay? Bye-bye.